And welcome into the Four Verticals Podcast, episode 155. Here on this college football semifinal Thursday, the first game tonight, I believe it's going to be Ole Miss in Miami, in Arizona, the Fiesta Bowl. It's finally here. And of course, tomorrow we have the other game in Atlanta. But of course, we are high atop, as per usual, at a somewhat cloudy Jacksonville, Florida. It's still mild. Still feels like spring, even though it's going to last another couple of days until the cold weather comes in. But that's fine. You know, we can take the wins we can get around this time of the year, especially around this part of the country. But, yeah, playoff talk, some final thoughts on the semifinals. I go back to my notes here. Final thoughts on the playoff, semifinals, transfer portal update, some movement there. Some names are still waiting up. There are some big names that are starting to go off, maybe close to going to be taken off the board. And we also have pretty significant changes to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers coaching staff. We'll touch on that on today's show. That's sort of the rundown. Again, if you are new here to the show, either on YouTube or on Spotify for our friends over there. Of course, we had our Vor Verticals Extra Pod yesterday. It went pretty well, I think. That was uploaded yesterday. Grant you some of the information has been outdated, especially when it comes to the Buccaneers stuff, but it is what it is. It's a it was a product of its time. But, yeah, be sure to follow us here on YouTube. You're live on YouTube right now as I'm recording this for Spotify. And, of course, this will be on Spotify later. But be sure to subscribe to Spotify account, page, YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe over there. Like the streams and the videos when we do those. Comment as well. And be sure to follow us on the socials on X, Twitter, and on Instagram as well. All of this stuff, by doing that, keeps this show absolutely free. This show is independent media, and our goal is to keep this show that way, regardless if I ever get ventures outside of us being independent, having partnerships with people. I would do it, but with the only condition that this show is ours, and we control everything that we do on this show from a topic standpoint and how we sort of operate. And it's going to continue, at least as we're independent, especially that's going to be the case here. So we need you guys to subscribe, okay, to keep this thing going. Helps us out too, because we feel like we're doing a good job here on our show. For the most part, there's stuff that we're not perfect at yet, but as we're entering our third year doing this now, which is crazy to think about, we've grown a little bit. We've also, some things we've learned as well, but we want to continue to grow. And I know we didn't meet our goal of getting to 20 subscribers before the end of the year a couple weeks ago. We can still, the show's going on. We're not doing anything to the show, but still, we would like to continue to grow our subscriber base. We do cover college football. That's our big focus point on this show. We do it twice a week, and we want you guys to join us and subscribe. So be sure to do that. Helps us keep this show free. We get some water real quick here before we really get in here, and I'm also going to check the audio on YouTube, make sure it's working. Those of you who are new here, yes, that's happened before where the audio on YouTube has not worked, but we shall check it real quick. I think it is going to work. Okay, it is working. That's good. College football semifinals. Tonight we have Miami, Ole Miss. Huge game there. We did our picks, by the way, on the Tuesday show. If you're looking for those, go to the Tuesday show for that on Spotify and YouTube. So we have Miami, Ole Miss tonight. We have Indiana and Oregon tomorrow. What I'm going to kind of do here is not necessarily a general final, because we've already previewed the game. So everything we've had to say, we've already talked about it. And so there's no use for us repeating what we said on the Tuesday show. But what I am going to do is kind of, my mind sort of works this way a little bit, and that I look at certain things, like moments like this, like before big sporting events, whether it's a Super Bowl, NCAA tournament, although we don't really talk about those that much. The Super Bowl we could if the Bucs ever make it back. But like any sporting event, both the ones we talk about here or the ones we don't, I always look at it in sort of like in terms of a documentary, like the one that'll be made, 5 to 10 years down the road. Like especially with Ole Miss in particular, I think there will be something of a documentary there relatively soon. But yeah, kind of like other folks sort of view things or view monumental moments in college football history in those lenses, and tonight's one of those nights. Because remember, whoever or whomsoever it's going to be wins these two games, moves on to the national championship. Regardless, we're going to have a first-time head coach winning a national championship, let alone a first time for a lot of these programs too, winning a national title. Or in the case of Ole Miss and Miami, ironically, they've won national titles back, a long time ago in basically a galaxy far, far away. But, they're looking for one in the modern era. So a lot of storylines here, but to go over, and I want to do it for every single program. Now, Grant Shield will sound very similar, but they're different in their own ways. But yeah, that's what we're going to do here. Sort of giving a interesting retrospect on what a win would mean for all these teams. First one up here, Oregon. You won't know how many times Oregon has been to a national title, or let alone they've been to two semifinals. But how many times have they been to a national title? Been there twice. They were there in 2010 to play Auburn and Cam Newton. They lost on a last second, literally last second field goal. Good game. Second time they went there, that was with Marcus Mariota, won the school's first Heisman. They lost that one to Ohio State. They got blown out. OSU pulled away. That was that team that that was loaded with NFL talent for the most part. So the last times they have been to the national title, they've lost. Now, a lot of folks will look at Oregon and say, well, they can't do it or they can never do it. They're a program that is cursed and whatnot. That's been kind of the vibe, at least down here, especially in the Southeast. That's a lot of the way folks talk about Oregon in that sense, that they're like a cursed program, and it's that O logo means 0 national titles. And look, that's all fine for memes and stuff, but generally, it's the classic thing. Josh Pitt brings up all the time. It's the cannot versus have not. It's not that they cannot win a national title. It's just they haven't won one yet. They've gone close. Okay, they've been there twice. They've gone close. One of them was a competitive game. One was not so much. They've been close. And could this be it, right? I mean, could this be first time in their program's history that they can actually win a national title? As I said before, they may not have the best, O-line and D-line talent. That's Miami. But in terms of overall talent, like blue chip ratio stuff, by the way, too, sort of a subplot to all this. Bud Elliott's blue chip ratio he puts out every single summer usually is a pretty good indicator of who will make it to the national championship, or at least teams that are expected to be there, right? The higher the ratio, the higher chances you'll go to a national title, because history has shown that a lot of those teams that have won a national title have been in that blue chip ratio in that list. Well, it would turn out that there was a chance that I could bust, right, with Ole Miss and Indiana. I think Miami and Oregon are in there. I know for sure Oregon is. Miami might be like on the verge of. I think they're on there, but two other teams, Ole Miss and Indiana, they're not on that list. So there's a very good chance that we'll have, at least in the modern era, our first non-blue chip ratio team to win a national title. So that's also on the line too. So that's very, very interesting. But to Oregon specifically, again, they may not have the best D-line and O-line talent. Again, that's with Miami, but they are, again, the highest rated blue chip ratio team out there. They have a lot of talent on defense and offense. Yes, there is some stuff going on with the coaching staff. Coaches leaving, like Tosh deployed to DC, and along with Will Stein. Again, like I've said before, though, it's nothing near what Ole Miss was dealing with before. But again, it's the fact that Oregon is so close to winning their first national title and getting back to it. It's pretty incredible. And to all the folks who are saying that, Oregon can't do it, or they're a cursed program. It's not that they can't do it, they just haven't done it. And who knows, maybe Dan Lanning is finally the coach that can say that they can do it. They just haven't done it. So that would be pretty incredible for Oregon. And not to mention, too, just to add more, extra layer to the Oregon national title thing, at least what would a win for them mean? Their rivals in Washington with Cal on the board, they did it a couple years ago. So that's not impossible to see Oregon make it to the national title, even though I did pick Miami to win the football game tonight. Or, I picked Indiana to win. Win for Oregon here, man, that would be so huge for them to get back to a national title after so many years of, trying so hard of, the Mario Cristobal years, and they were kind of meandering a little bit towards the end of the Mark Hilfridge years, and how much, consistency they've built up. This feels like to me a culmination point of all the stuff they've been through over the last, 10 years since they last made it to the national championship. The next one, Ole Miss. I want to hear an interesting stat here. Ole Miss, the last time they won a national title was, I believe, according to this paper is right, was when John F. Kennedy was the president, or at least around that time, right, during like the Cuban Missile Crisis and during the height of the Cold War. That's incredible. That is so incredible. And to see Ole Miss, if they pull this off tonight, they beat Miami, they, if they actually survive what is again the best O-line and D-line combination in college football. Then making it to the national title would one, have SEC representation, which is, group of the conference, I guess, to at least hopefully stop the Big Ten from winning another national title. Which, look, it's guaranteed that we get a team in, right, regardless of who wins tomorrow. But for Ole Miss to actually make it to a national title in our lifetime, like the last time again they made it, our parents were even born yet. Most of us, and it was mainly our grandparents who remember that. We don't. And we have never had a chance to see Ole Miss get there before, which would be just an amazing spectacle, right? Just incredible. I cannot fathom how amazing that would be if Ole Miss does make it here. Let alone this is coming after the year that people thought was the year they're going to do it, right? We talked about on the Tuesday show. People thought, oh yeah, last year when they bring in Walter Nolan and they went hard in the portal last year, and they had Jackson Dart last year, and everyone was going, oh man, like this Ole Miss team when they lost to Florida and they lost to LSU, it's like man, like they've really missed opportunity here. They really screwed this up. Well, here they are a year later. And not to mention, I haven't mentioned the Lane Kiffin stuff. Dealing with a coaching change in the middle of all this. And having to bring in a skeleton crew, essentially. And having a new head coach learn on the fly. That's the thing to remember here. Like Pete Golding has never had coaching experience outside this whole journey, right? From the first semifinal, from the first playoff game to where they are now. This is his first season, learning on the job, right? Again, the game against Georgia, yeah, there was a lot of mistakes happening, and a lot of folks were very critical of that and would have been even more critical if they lost that game. But you have to remember, he's still learning on the fly, and I guarantee you there will be mistakes made tonight. There'll probably be, weird decisions and maybe poor clock management. He's still learning, right? Like, this is incredible. They've gone to this point with what they've been through, both on the field and off the field. Just incredible to watch. And if they make it, if you're an SEC, supporter and whatnot, if you're a prospective fan from the other rival fan bases and you're cheering on Ole Miss and you're, wearing that SEC sticker proud on your chest there, this is big for the conference, right? Because they lose, it will be a Big Ten team versus an ACC team in Miami. And once again, be another year in which the SEC does not win a national title, which from a conference perspective and a propaganda standpoint, not good. As for Miami, same sort of Ole Miss, but they're a little bit different. The last time they had an opportunity to play for a national championship was when they faced, Maurice Clarett and that Ohio State team of Jim Tressel back in 2002, 2003, I believe. That was the last time they made it. So it's been a very long time now, let alone they haven't won a national title since they beat Nebraska in 2001, I believe, or 2002 was technically the calendar year. But anyway, it was that season. There has been a lot of talk about sort of the U being back, right? Josh Pate talked about it. He kind of revealed this a couple of days ago on this show about a conversation he had with Mario Cristobal. He was down there a couple of years ago when he was still with CBS. And I don't, kind of paraphrasing what Josh said here, but it's sort of a situation where Josh was talking to Mario and someone, I don't know who it was, but someone came in and this person talked to Mario about, the U coming back and whatnot, and the aura of the U, and, Mario, trying to be more civil and, had a conversation with him and whatnot. That person leaves, and, once him and Josh were alone, he basically tells Josh, and again, I'm paraphrasing here, the U's not coming back. Like, we have to create our own culture. And, it's something I didn't think about because, again, a lot of folks have talked about it, right? The U, the mystique of it, it was a big thing when Mark Rich came back a couple years ago when he was the coach there for a few years before he retired. About the swagger being back and the U chain, the turnover chain, and sort of the whole bringing back that swagger from the early 2000s and a lot of the 80s and 90s. But it's interesting to hear Mario say, "Look, we need to move on from that. We need to create our own culture because that's not the way college football is now. College football is not what it was in the early 2000s, nor is it how it was in the 80s and 90s. It's completely different now. Different recruiting standards." The lines on map in terms of where you recruit is completely different now. The way you staff is different. The way the structure of the sport's different. So they've really had to adapt here. And Mario, being from that era, being someone who was in that era, who's been in all the documentaries and stuff like that, and has rings from that era, he knows that better than anyone else that they need to make some change. They need to make some changes fundamentally, and they've done that for the most part. They brought a swagger that is familiar somewhat to a lot of the legacy Miami fans and fans who've been cheering for the team for a while, but is also different in terms of fitting up the structure currently of the sport. And they do this. If they do this and they win tonight and they make it a national title and they win it, incredible job he has done there. Given how terrible they had started, remember, they lost Middle Tennessee. Like, they were giving up like 50 points to them. Then they lose to Georgia Tech on that terrible clock management fumble thing. It's like going from that to where they are now, just a few years later, it's incredible, right? That's insane to me how it's went from there to there. And that's credit to that whole staff there, and credit to Mario for doing that too. And credit to him for changing the culture and making it to where we are not focusing on the flash and the glamour of the 2000s and the 80s and the 90s too. We're moving on from that. We need to create our own thing that we can be proud of, and we create, and it fits in the the realm of current college football. And not to mention too for the ACC as well. Like the ACC, the last time they won a national title, paper pop here, was all the way back in 2018, the end of last decade. That was Clemson, and Clemson is the only one who has won consistently in the ACC, has been in this position. Miami's the first time a team not named Clemson has been in this situation since Florida State back in 2014. So it's been almost like literally 10 years plus since it happened. And of course, it's been several years since they've won a national title. So they do this and they win a national championship again. They can do it. They certainly have the capabilities of doing it. Again, they have the best O-line and D-line combination in the entire, really in all of college football, and especially in the playoff, which is extremely dangerous for any team they have to face, whether it's Oregon or Indiana, if they win. So that'll be huge for them. Now, finally, Indiana. Again, like I said on the show Tuesday, imagine telling yourself 10 years ago that, hey, one day, in the year of our Lord 2026, that Indiana, not in basketball, mind you, this is not basketball, nor is this track or baseball or lacrosse or ice hockey. In football, college football would be one win away from winning a national title. On top of everything else they have done already, beating Oregon on the road, let alone, telling yourself 10 years ago that Oregon and all these other Pac-12 teams would be in the Big Ten now, and the Pac-12 is sort of dead, even though it's technically back now. But anyway, like, just imagine telling yourself that 10 years ago, that Indiana, one play away from winning a national, or one game away from playing for a national title, let alone, again, everything they've done on top of that, again, beating Oregon, beating Ohio State for the first time in my lifetime, winning the Big Ten championship game, again, the first time in my lifetime, going to the Rose Bowl for the first time, again, in my lifetime. Incredibly historical, and something that I guarantee you, well, I should be careful here. I'm pretty sure we will never see again in the history of Indiana football, much like what we're seeing with Vanderbilt and their success, right? I probably won't see Vanderbilt winning 10 games again in my lifetime, more likely. But if Indiana were to do it and pull this off and make it to the national championship, it might be the most interesting and weirdest thing we've ever seen. Just the rise of Indiana football. Again, go back to a couple years ago too, when they had Michael Penix was there too. This is before he transferred to Washington. When he was there, when he had the wide receiver fry football, and they were moving up on the up and down the field on Ohio State during 2020, right? That weird season. We all thought, man, that's the best Indiana team we've ever seen. This is topped that by a million. Like, this is incredible to watch. And if they make it, imagine a documentary on that. Just the stories and sort of how this thing came together. And, years down the line when Cignetti retires or whatever, and he's telling the stories of how, when he was hired and bringing over his entire team from JMU, who was very successful in the FCS level in their first year and FBS, just all of those things, right? And the way they did things, and just again, I just thinking of all the content that could come out of that, and of that old story, just incredible. It's almost hard to put it into words, but if they do make it here again, I cannot emphasize how crazy and weird this is that Indiana could be potentially playing for a national championship. It's crazy and it's insane that this would be happening. But then again, this is where, well, I'm not going to say it's like the new norm, but with the way college football is right now and the way the system's set up to where you can have transfer portal and, you have all these, different things that are not like properly regulated, and not to mention the way the playoff is structured, this could happen, although it's very sanitized. But even then, when people bring up, a Cinderella, right? Sort of like when you bring up an NCAA tournament. Indiana's not necessarily a dark horse team. They're kind of a team that, was a preseason ranked team. So they're not like one of these like G5s or, like a Mississippi State who was terrible last year. Like, this is not really necessarily that. This is them building off of something they did last year. So No, I wouldn't call it as a Cinderella. This is more or less just them basically building off what they did last year, and they are doing it in a way that was not. I mean, I guess it is kind of bubble gum and paper clipping it, but they're again, like I said, they've had they have an identity. They're executing it with really decently talented players. A lot of other folks overlooked that they kind of did. So yeah, it is kind of a dark horse thing, but they're not really. Because again, go look at the preseason AP pool, and they were there. They were swimming around down there. No one, up to including me, were not paying attention to them. So yeah, take that for what it's worth. But yeah, just some final thoughts there. A bit of a retrospective on all the teams that are competing tonight, or tonight and tomorrow, in college football, and the playoff semifinals. Again, as we hit 20 minutes here now on the show, again, just be sure to subscribe to the show. Again, we do this all year round. College football, for the most part, that's what the show is all about. College football. I mean, look, we do Buccaneers and topics as they are my favorite NFL team. Yes, we'll bring in other topics that are not football related from time to time, mainly Marvel and Star Wars news. But as I mentioned on the show Tuesday, that we are trying this new tactic of restructuring the show a little bit. Not the topics, but just the way we do things. So, like for example, the Four Verticals Extra Pod, which is a Spotify only show, basically. And you have to make sure you subscribe over there to get that, because it's not on YouTube. That's where if you are a Marvel fan, you're a Star Wars fan, or you just like a Q&A based show, that is for you. So we'll be doing those on Wednesdays only, on Spotify only. So kind of a third back to what we were doing, how we were doing it before. But be sure to subscribe to the channel too while you're at it as well. Even if you're not, a big fan of YouTube, just do it. The button's like down there somewhere. I think maybe it's down there or over here. I don't necessarily remember off the top of my head. I should, because it's the platform I use. But anyway, just be sure to do it. Subscribe, and also subscribe to our social feeds as well: X, Twitter, Instagram. I'm also aware that there's a lot of things going on in the world right now, both domestically here in the U.S. and internationally. This is a good escape for everyone, right? Just to kind of take a deep breath and focus on college football, and get ready for the games today and tomorrow night, tonight. Transfer portal. Still a lot of talent out there that has not made the decision, but I think we're getting close on a few of these. But there are some notable players that we need to talk about. First one here, Josh Pate-style paper pop. DJ Lagway, formerly of Florida, visited Florida State. A lot of folks were kind of adhesive about that, a mixture of, Gus Malzahn and DJ Lagway. I talked about this, I think, on Tuesday as well, but may as well just repeat myself. Look, I understand it. Look, he's not like the best fit for that style of offense. I mean, look, I'm not saying he's not some statue. No, the DJ is clearly a dual threat guy, but he's not what you would typically think of a Malzahn quarterback. So that's why when he was visiting Florida State, DJ, a lot of folks who I follow closely who pay attention to Florida State were going, could work, could also not work, could see it really not going too well. Well, it turns out he is not going to Florida State. He is going to Baylor to join Dave Aranda's roster there. How about that? Interesting fit there as well, given that I believe that Jake Spavital still the coordinator there. Let me do some research here. Jake Spavital. I think he is still there. I don't think he took his coaching job. At least I don't believe he did. Here we go. Spavital. Let me see here. He is still at Baylor, I think. Yeah, he's still there. So, yeah, he is still the OC at Baylor. So, interesting fit there for DJ. I think, it makes sense kind of as we were hearing stuff about, hey, it's closer to home. If you remember back towards his recruitment, a couple years ago, he was originally, I think, committed to A&M. Then he switched, or at least he was thinking about going to A&M. He's from Texas. He's a Texas kid. Going to Baylor, going to a conference that sneakily might actually have the best quarterback situation in all football, potentially, going to next year. So, interesting fit there for Spavital. It's not the best fit ever. I mean, it is kind of, in a way, sort of how I would feel about if he actually had gone to Florida State and worked with Gus Malzahn, who is somehow still there somehow. I don't know how, but I guess he is still going to be the OC there at Florida State. But with Baylor, Dave Aranda, look, it's a good get either way, right? You need a good quarterback. There's a good talent there. He's a bigger guy. He can obviously run, but he's not like a pure runner. He's definitely more on that power runner type style, sort of like an EJ Manuel type. There we go. That's probably a better example, like a poor man EJ Manuel. least in terms of his skills and his abilities. Which again, he could run, but he wasn't like a fast, he wasn't like a pure runner like I don't know, like Michael Vick, Lamar Jackson, Jane Daniels. He's more of one of those power runners, like a Dak Prescott, Cam type, where it could work, right? And then that was on offense, but it wasn't. I don't know. It seemed like a very odd fit given what they were doing last year with Tommy Castellanos. But now for Baylor, yes, you're running more of that air raid concept, but given that you are, if you're a DJ, the logic here is, look, you're going to a conference that, in terms of defense, is not serious about it. You can easily dominate there and put up some good numbers. And hey, maybe in a couple of years or so, you'll get, or actually, I think now a year because he's draft eligible. Hey, in a year or so, you could be in the works to get a high draft pick, or at least become a high draft pick in the NFL. So, again, like I said, the Big 12 sneakily having some really good quarterback rooms. You have him, Musamaker over at Oklahoma State now, checking 247's board here. I believe who's the other one that's could potentially go elsewhere in conference? Sam Levitt as well could be on the move. So that is interesting to see. Josh Hoover leaving though, but that's him Rockenbeck leaving. That does hurt, but for potential as well. For other quarterbacks, see like Brandon Sorsby going from Cincinnati to some of my nose. From Cincinnati to Texas Tech. So even though you're losing a couple good players in Becht and Josh Hoover, the Big 12 again still having really good talent. They're a quarterback. Another one here, Damon Williams from Washington leaving. This one kind of surprising, though. I will be interested to see if this was bubbling underneath the surface. I am aware of the legal stuff. Look, I'm not a lawyer. I didn't go to law school. Obviously, won't be doing this, but I don't know. Look, they're suing him. There was some money things here. Look, either way, he's in the database. So at least according to 247, he's in there. So where could he go? I don't know. Could be anywhere. Could be TCU potentially. They need a quarterback. Could be a number of schools that could be in the market for him. Interesting to see. He's a very underrated talent too. He's definitely more of a dual threat guy than DJ Thagway. I'll just say that he's more of a runner. He's definitely fits. He would definitely fit a more run option based offense. At least in my opinion, I think he'll fit that. Other big names still out there. Speaking of running quarterbacks, Deuce Knight still hanging around. Hearing some smoke about Ole Miss. There's also, and again, it's a very small chance, with the very small outside chance that he may return to Auburn. Potentially, if other schools are not over the moon about him joining them, whether it's the skill set not matching or maybe some of these rumors of him being a bad teammate. I don't know. At least I don't think that's the case. But in my opinion, him coming out to Auburn is not likely. But it's a very 15 to 10 chance of him coming back. Still out, I would imagine the more likely scenario that he's gone forever and he's not coming back. Another one that's still not committed yet is Dylan Raiola. Still out there. He's not settled on anywhere. So that is interesting given that, Nebraska's already taken a quarterback. So there's that. Running backs, Hollywood Smothers, NC State, going to Bama. Yes, I know a lot of folks will say, well, the talent level from going from the ACC to the SEC is different, which is true. But there's been good ACC talent that's left, and they've done well in the SEC. Look at Jahmyr Gibbs, right? Ironically, a Bama player who came from Georgia Tech a couple years ago. So I think good pickup for Bama. I think Hollywood Smothers is a very, very good running back. Get up there because he needs some help there. Get that, especially based on who they have lost. Other names to mention here: Kane Durham from LSU is in the portal. Dylan Edwards from Kansas State, he's back in the portal or back in the transfer market. And CJ Baxter from Texas, another big name there. And as for receivers, still a lot of names landing, or I'm going to rephrase that. There are names landing, right? There's a lot of decent names that are landing that have made commitments to schools. Like, for example, Eugene Wilson, he's going to LSU. Terrell Anderson from NC State going to USC. Nick Marsh, someone who's kind of underrated at Michigan State. He's going interconference and going to Indiana. So another big get there for Kirk Cinetti. Isaiah Cannon going from Georgia Tech to the other side of the rivalry to Georgia. Now the big one that has not made a decision yet is Cam Coleman. Much like Deuce Knight, I kind of expect, or at least I am assuming, that he is not coming back to Auburn. I think it's been made pretty clear that he has no intentions of coming back. That's just my opinion. Could he come back? Is there a smaller chance of him coming back? Yeah, there is, but it's not very high. I would say with him, it's more 90 to 10. It's 90% he's leaving, 10% he could come back. I'm assuming he's not coming back. and he'll go elsewhere. Texas Tech, definitely in the mix there. Texas, definitely in the mix there. Ohio State, potentially in the mix. Alabama could be in the mix too. He's an Alabama native. And again, I don't know him for sure where he's going to go. There's a lot of speculation, right? But he is the number one player in the portal currently. It's based on all the services. He is a very highly talented player. Again, remember, he was in that same recruiting class with Ron Williams and Jeremiah Smith. He's been unfortunately been stuck in quarterback hell being Auburn, and he unfortunately, fortunately for him, he's making the right decision in terms of money and future to go elsewhere. And again, I know there's rumors about him being a bad teammate and being a potential locker room issue. Again, guys, that's rumors and stuff. I don't know if that's really true or not. I know a lot of folks do believe in that. I'm going to look at it as, look, that's out there. Should it be addressed to a certain extent? Yes, but is it like real shit to talk about? Probably not. So again, with the whole locker room stuff with him and a lot of the players from Auburn, guys, I don't know if it's really true or not. It could be, but who knows? But he is definitely a talented player. Wherever he goes, he is going to shine, and he will probably be the best receiver on any roster he goes to. Even Ohio, maybe not Ohio State, but he'll definitely be a 1A, 1B there with Jeremiah Smith. But yeah, he's still out there. He's still available. Again, I know a lot of folks are wish casting and sort of doing this wish fulfillment thing where, can we please get Cam Coleman back to Auburn? Guys, again, I don't think that's happening. I really just don't think it's going to happen. I think he is like gone. And same with other guys like Deuce Smith. Like, I think he's like gone in terms of he's not coming back. So now, one thing I will mention here is we'll move on is the lack of defensive line talent and O-line talent. There's decent players there, like the O-line talent. I mean, there's some 4-star rated guys, but not a whole lot of them are like, the best players out there. And the same thing with the D-line. The only defensive line player that I think is worth watching is Chaz Coleman from Penn State. He has not made a destination. There's no destination for him yet. I would imagine teams in the southeastern region will be in big demand for him. Clemson potentially could be a huge player for him, or at least a big mover for him. Of course, Tom Allen, the former DC at Penn State, he is there at Clemson. I think he's still there. I don't think he left. I know Clemson fired the OC. Let me double check, make sure that's the case. If he is still there, then that makes sense. Yeah, he's still there. So that I would imagine that he would be in play. Chaz Coleman for Clemson. Of course, other names that could come up there: Miami in the ACC, Bama, LSU, potentially Auburn. Don't think so, but like the bigger schools in the SEC, A&M too. So just names to keep an eye on there. But yeah, lack of big time O-line, D-line transfers. That's interesting. Again, that's a premium position, especially for schools like Auburn, Penn State. To a certain extent, other schools who have had coaching changes would like to get some depth there and better players in place, especially on those two on the lines of scrimmage. It'll be tough, and a lot of the best ones are already making decisions. So not a whole lot of talent out there. Now, granted, we still have the 4 playoff teams, so those guys can leave. But at the moment, very, very dry in terms of that type of talent. But yeah, transfer portal still turning and still going round and round. I don't think it's necessarily done yet. I think there's still a lot of big names to land somewhere. If anything happens, like, when we have in between now and we do a show, of course, we'll talk about it on the show. We may do a breaking news video, like tomorrow, for example. Like if Cam Coleman decides, hey, I'm going to X school, we'll probably do a short video on it because he is the best available player out there. So there is that. But yeah, the transfer portal, very, very active. Probably the most active one we've seen since maybe 2023, I think. But we'll keep an eye on it. Of course, we'll have more updates on it on our next show. Now, finally here, Bucs coaching staff update. Of course, last time we spoke technically on the show Tuesday, but also yesterday on the extra pod, mentioned about the whole John Harbaugh thing, right? John Harbaugh gets, parting ways fired from the Ravens. A lot of folks in Tampa Bay circles thought, hey, John Harbaugh's out there. He has some connections with, Jason Light, the Bucs GM, potential there for a reunion, especially if if they feel they have a good chance with them. And a lot of folks believe that. And look, I kind of was buying into it a little bit, but as I started to think more about it, and the reason why people were saying that is because when the reports came out that Harbaugh was available, talking about John here, not his brother, when John was available, or at least made available to other organizations, because again, it's logical to believe that he would be available. The word out there from places like ESPN and other reports are saying, hey, like there's around 6 to 7, 6, 7. That was gonna happen at some point, but 7 to around 5, in between that number of teams that were contacting Harbaugh. And what's weird is that that's not including the Ravens. Right? The Ravens would not try to hire Harbaugh again. That would be kind of stupid, or you wouldn't be doing that. So folks are wondering, hey, there's at least 1 or 2 mystery teams out there that have contacted John Harbaugh for his services. And who was it going to be? Now, the 2 popular ones, at least I think, are out there, were both the Buccaneers, obviously, and then I think the Minnesota Vikings, right? The Vikings one, I said this yesterday on the extra pod, kind of makes sense, right? J.J. McCarthy's the quarterback. Obviously, John's brother Jim coached him in college. There's some family ties there with that, at least family familiarity with him. So that's an option. And that it could be still on the table, too, because we have not heard anything. At least, look, I'm not a Vikings fan. Nothing yet on Kevin O'Connell. But the other one was, of course, Tampa, right? Of course, John was with the Eagles back in the early 2000s, along with Jason Light. We both know each other. And also his offensive coordinator, Tom Monken, who coached in Tampa for a number of years during the Jared Coder regime. So there was certainly some connections here with Tampa. Though over time, it started to seem like, maybe that's a pipe dream. And now it's official. Now that Todd Bowles has come back. That was made yesterday. Of course, happens after we record our extra pod. And what that means, at least yesterday, that meant that we'll be getting coaching changes today. And they came with a number of big hitters. Now, first of all, there is some defensive staff changes too, like Charlie Strong, the former South Florida, Texas coach, Louisville coach. He is out. So he is no longer on the Buccaneers staff, along with other key pieces, which is not shocking. That was being talked about for a while, that Todd would have, if he was still around, he was going to have to make some changes on the defensive staff, whether it's making total changes with the staff or potentially bringing in a DC. We'll see about the DC part. Now, as for the offensive side of the football, basically it's starting to look like a clean slate here. That Lewis out at QB coach. Then the big one, Josh Gazard out at OC. Now, just to be clear here, the defense was the issue this year for Tampa, not the offense. That's at least my opinion. Now, look, if you want to blame someone, if Todd's not getting the X here, if someone had the, metaphorically get the hypothetical guillotine on the head, right? I know that sounds very graphic, but that's what Josh Gazard was basically, he was basically used for that purpose, right? In terms of what his position was. So he's fired. He's out. Now, to be clear, Josh based out of Paper Pop. While, yes, I think a lot of us would assume that the offense under Gazard in his only year was not going to be anywhere near Liam Cohen's offense, right? The Liam Cohen offense last year, or 2024, was just something that we have not really seen outside of the Brady years, right? It was very efficient. Baker put up a lot of good numbers. Cohen was very creative. Of course, he comes from that Sean McVay coaching tree from the Rams. So, yeah, I think a lot of folks knew that, it was going to be a step off, but we didn't think it was going to be that much of a step off in terms of it was going to go back to where it was under Byron Leftwich, right? Well, as it turns out, based on the numbers here, that offense under Josh Gazard was slightly better than Dave Canales. Now, we'll say in terms of creativity, Dave Canales is a lot better in terms of creativity, right? I think he did a much better job of doing different type of styles of the offense and doing motion and stuff like that. Whereas Gazardo was very kind of a poor man's version of what Liam was trying to do, but he was also doing some other stuff. But yeah, in terms of the offensive output, it wasn't that different than what you had under Liam. It was different under Liam. It was different versus Liam Cohen, but it wasn't that different from what you had under Dave Canales. So it was actually a little bit slightly better, and it could be a lot better if the Buccaneers had done better down the stretch. So we won't be having this conversation if they would have been winning games. That's kind of what I'm trying to say here, is that if they were winning more games, obviously there would not be any changes here, but something had to happen. Now, the folks over at Pewter Report, Scott Reynolds and all of them, and folks over there, I was listening to them earlier when I was going for my run, they brought up this little theory that it is possible. Whoever, with the Buccaneers making this change of, with the offensive coordinator changes and just overhauling the entire staff, especially on offense, that it is possible. I know this sounds kind of dirty, but the way Scott Reynolds was putting it out there is that it's not impossible to think that the Buccaneers are thinking ahead here and saying, hey, look, either Todd's going to get fired next year if the team's so bad and things go off the rails, or regardless of or they make the playoffs and they win the South again, and he ends up retiring because he is getting older, right? He said publicly, Todd has said that he does not intend to be coaching well past his mid-60s. He wants to, retire, hang out with his family, whatnot, move on with his life. So the thinking is that eventually you will have to make a coaching change, whether it's through retirement with Todd or he just gets fired. So the thinking is from Scott Reynolds, and he said this earlier, is that it's possible that Tampa's looking ahead, saying, hey, look, Todd's not going to be here much longer, whether he gets fired or he resigns or retires. We need to bring in our future coach. So essentially, their goal potentially could be this next OC is going to probably be the next head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So basically, this coaching search for the OC is basically going to be doubling as a head coaching search for the head coaching waiting. That's interesting. I didn't think about that, but yeah, it makes sense that, hey, if you're making a change now, at least prepare for it and learn from the mistakes of not trying to retain Liam Cohen. Now, again, I brought up my theories as to why the whole thing went down last year of Liam. And my personal theory, at least the one I bought into, is that, look, I'm pretty sure he wanted the job last year, and I believe there were conversations privately about, hey, is Todd going to stick around? Is he going to retire or not? Did he want to go out? Because remember, last year they won 10 games last year. And, I wouldn't put it past at least it wouldn't surprise me. There was talk about, hey, they were doing so well last year. Tampa could potentially Todd retire. I guarantee you, Liam heard that stuff. Of course, he would have to because he's part of the organization. But I guarantee you heard that and went, maybe I could be the next coach here. Maybe I could, take over and not take the Jacksonville job. But then when it turns out Todd has come back and he's being retained as head coach, he's not going anywhere. I think Liam just said, all right, fine, I'll go somewhere else to be a head coach. And he took the Jacksonville job. That's why it went down how it did. At least that's how I think it went down. It's not official, but it wouldn't surprise me down the road. It comes out, hey, Liam thought he was going to get that job in Tampa and he didn't. So that's why he ended up going and come back to Jacksonville saying, hey, you guys thought your job was not open. That's why I think we'll still be here last year. But moving on from that, turns out the best options out there. Now, there's been a lot of hot boards out there and folks put out all of their names. But for me, there's about 3 names I would feel comfortable with. First one, probably the least likely, but would be a big name and would sort of fit that kind of quasi head coaching waiting is Mike McDaniel, the former Dolphins head coach, was fired earlier today. I think around the same time the Buccaneers made their announcements on coaching changes, at least with the staff. So yeah, Mike McDaniel, he's a Kyle Shanahan guy. He's followed Kyle. Of course, he's the current head coach. Well, he's been the head coach of the 49ers for a number of years now, but comes to that same tree, runs a very innovative offense, a lot of, being able to scheme guys up in a very modern offense. It would fit in a way in terms of bringing in a Liam Cohen type voice. He's a veteran play caller. He's been doing it for a while. Offense wasn't the problem there in Miami. It was kind of the quarterback situation and other issues to that organization. But if Tampa were to hire Mike McDaniel, that's very unlikely because I think Mike is going to be heavily coveted by other prospective teams, whether it's other OC jobs or just head coaching jobs. I think there will be some teams that would be taking, at least having him interview, I think. That wouldn't surprise me. I think it may be happening now since it's available. But, this would fit the bill of a potential head coaching waiting, someone who, again, kind of fits that Liam Cohen mode of, hey, he's a veteran guy. He's been playing call. He's been a very successful play caller. He could potentially harness something that Liam harnessed last year last year. Yeah, that would be certainly a dynamite hire, and potentially if Todd were to step down or get fired, Mike would be in line being the next head coach, and therefore the Bucs would not lose him. The next one, probably more realistic in my opinion, is Nate Shieldhouse, the current offensive coordinator of the Rams. If the Buccaneers really liked that style of offense with Liam Cohen during the 2024 season, they liked that Rams style, and sort of kind of got away from it this year with Josh Gizzard. Bring in Nate Stillhouse. Now the problem with Stillhouse is not that he's a bad offensive coordinator and that he's stupid and he wouldn't work as an OC for Tampa. I think he would work, and I think he's probably the most reasonable option here. But the problem is that they still have a game this Saturday or Sunday. I think it's Saturday that they play. I think they're playing the 49ers. I don't remember the schedule off the top of my head, but they do have a playoff game this weekend. It's a wild card game. So they're still, going to be playing football. Another problem is, and so that kind of backs up the timeline, but also Steelhouse is going to be very, very coveted among a lot of head coaching potential, right? If Liam Cohen can get a job last year, right, of the Jags after being an OC for Tampa for 1 year, Steelhouse is going to be very coveted for a lot of these jobs. So think like the Falcons job potentially, the Cardinals job. So think some of those lower tier jobs you'd imagine Steelhouse will be available for. So if he's getting those looks as a head coach, he's probably going to say no to any offensive coordinator jobs. At least that's my opinion. So that's kind of why I'm more hesitant with that name. But it's not impossible here. So that, I mean, it's at least get. But, hey, look, again, if you want familiarity, if you want to get back to that Liam Cohen style of offense, and hey, on top of it, potentially getting this guy as head coach and keeping him, then I think Tampa should do that. Now, my personal favorite, at least in my opinion, I know this is going to, make some folks cringe here. I think it's Cliff Kingsbury. I know that's going to, Cliff Kingsbury, Commanders basically fired him last year. Well, or this past week. Well, you get fired, he in the mutual parting of ways, technically, but the reason why he's on this list, and look, I think more highly of Cliff Kingsbury than other people. Yes, the Cardinals thing went kind of awry, especially towards the end there. I get that. But he's still a good offensive coordinator. Again, go look at last year we did have Jay Daniels, and I know this year was not good, but with the Commanders. But then again, like Daniels was like in and out of the lineup, and there was a lot of injuries and stuff. So I don't blame it on him this year. I know other folks will blame it on him. Not to mention head coach Dan Quinn. But as a play caller, I think he's a good play caller, man. I think he really is good, and I think his offense is sort of in that realm of innovative, but also familiar because again, Baker played for this guy in college at Texas Tech. I get granted it was for 1 year, but he's familiar with him. He's familiar with that style of offense. It's similar to what, for example, Lincoln Riley has run at USC and at Oklahoma. So this movie is the perfect match. He's available too. Now, granted, he will be getting a lot of looks for potentially head coach, but also other OCs. So, and it is a very saturated market. So it's going to be tough to get him. But to say that he would not pass up the opportunity, or let me rephrase that. To say that he would pass up the opportunity to not coach one of his former quarterbacks, that to me would be stupid. At least in my opinion, to not be considered for this job or to let him pass it up. So I think Cliff Kingsbury is not only my favorite, but he's also another pretty reasonable bet, at least in my opinion. That's crazy that no one's brought him up at all, period. Maybe it is the stigma of, hey, he was a terrible coach with the Cardinals towards the end, and what happened in D.C. and Washington this past season. Look, I get that, but again, I don't think all that's technically his fault. Mainly the Commander stuff. Now, the Cardinals thing, I get it. He did not manage that very well. But as a play caller, as an OC, and look, maybe that's why you don't bring him in, because you don't want him to be the new head coach. But my counter to that is, why not? You're getting Cliff Kingsbury as, potentially as your next head coach. He's Cliff Kingsbury 2.0. So who's to say he hasn't learned some stuff after being around Dan Quinn and potentially learning under Todd Bowles as an OC for 1 year. Not only you have his, buddy from college, at least for 1 year at Texas Tech. So I think Cliff Kingsbury is a very sneaky candidate. It's amazing to me he has not been mentioned more. But yeah, so again, the biggest name out there, of course, is Mike McDaniel. The most reasonable is Nate Steelhouse from the Rams. I think the one that would be the best fit. Again, it's not me being just a fan of Cliff Kingsbury, though it kind of is. It just logically does make sense. And I think Cliff Kingsbury being the Bucs OC and potentially being their future head coach, I don't think it's impossible. Again, I know the folks will hate it. I wouldn't mind it personally because I like that style of offense, but that's just me. And not to mention, too, the roster he'll be inheriting is, well, yes, there's a lot of names who are moving on and whether it's free agency or retirements. There's still good talent there, right? Especially out of the receivers and also kind of a running back as well. So, and not to mention, too, you're working with Jason Light, who's a very smart GM as well. So there is also that to consider. So the Bucs offensive coordinator search is beginning. We'll get a lot more updates going forward, I would imagine. By the time we get to the Super Bowl, which will be in a few weeks or so, or about in a month or so, it's because we will have some answers on the I think we'll get a hire by then. So hopefully it won't be too long, but we'll see. And that's it for the show. Again, we'll be back on Monday, or excuse me, on Tuesday now. I was thinking about this. Do we do a reaction tonight? Do we do a reaction tomorrow? I'm still considering it, so just keep an eye on it. But if anything, we'll do a reaction tomorrow to both of them, both playoff games more than likely. So just keep an eye on that. But most likely you'll see me again on Tuesday for the Tuesday show now. If anything else breaks, like any coaching, like if the Bucs somehow hire an OC like tomorrow, or if there's any big movements in the transfer portal, we'll do a breaking news segment on it, like an individual video. But Probably not. So I think we'll be okay here in terms of that. But yeah, potential reactions to the playoff games. I may do one tonight. May just do both of them tomorrow. Do a full-on recap. But most likely until Tuesday. Who knows? Maybe you'll see me later again tonight. Take care. Enjoy the games tonight and tomorrow. Big games and also the NFL games this weekend. Playoff games. Very strange as a Bucs fan not having us play, but hey, it is. Maybe it's a good thing. A nice little break there from being involved in the playoffs. But anyway, enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy the games tonight. Enjoy the games this weekend. Take care, and we'll see you guys on the next stream.